your own mission control panel for peak performance, a powerful system for organizing your professional life around the 4 pillars of flow. In this module, you'll learn to construct your own mission control panel for peak performance, a powerful system for organizing your professional life around the 4 pillars of flow. Removing flow blockers, increasing flow proneness, embedding flow triggers, and mastering the flow cycle. And you'll learn how to work fewer hours as a means to significantly increase your productivity and decrease sacrifices in your personal life. You're also going to learn how to tap into what we call whole brain productivity, turning your idle moments and passive time into hours that are just as productive, sometimes more productive than the hours you spend directly focusing on work. And you're going to learn how to spend each workday focused on the activities that lead you directly to your goals and the wind down routine that will ensure your next workday is cleared and optimized for flow. Now, over the past decade, at the Flow Research Collective, we've trained over 10,000 leaders and highly skilled professionals, along with dozens of teams from the biggest companies on earth. And as we worked with more clients, we noticed an interesting pattern. While our clients were making progress and seeing results, many of them reported feeling overwhelmed by the sheer number of productivity tools and techniques they were using. They had habit trackers, they had to-do lists, note-taking apps, calendars, and all sorts of other kinds of tech tools. And each tool maybe served a purpose, but juggling them all was starting to feel like a productivity drain in itself. And we found a powerful fix for this tech and tool overwhelm that plagues so many of us, which means that you're not going to need to download a new app within this training. The key isn't in more technology. It's maximizing simplicity and getting all we can out of the technology that we already use. The solution, which we're going to be going deep into in this module, is to consolidate everything into your calendar. That means your habit tracking, a lot of your note taking, your to-do list, and of course, all the things you probably already use your calendar for. All your goals, actions, habits, and priorities are going to live in this one place. A single source of truth from which all of your performance will emanate. Now, in order to do this, we'll be using the calendar in a fundamentally different way to what you're used to. It's not the calendar that leaves you feeling reactive, overwhelmed, and out of control. To harness the 4 pillars of flow, we need to make our calendars work for us rather than against us. We call this flow habit calendar surrender. Calendar surrender, which is what we're going to be focused on in today's module, is a science-backed strategy for optimizing our schedules and all of our behavior across all of our life for flow. It's about front-loading your decisions so that in the moment, you don't have to think. You can simply execute mindlessly without wondering, analyzing, or questioning what it is you have to do in any given moment. With calendar surrender, you'll block time for your most essential work, ensuring that the flow blockers don't stand a chance. You'll schedule in the habits and routines that elevate flow proneness, and you'll engineer your days to include the flow triggers, those preconditions that usher you into flow. And of course, you'll respect the flow cycle, building in time for rest and recovery so you can approach each new challenge refreshed and ready. Think of calendar surrender kind of like pre-programming your day for optimal performance. At its core, it's about the concept of liberating constraints, the idea that by imposing structure and boundaries in certain areas, we can unlock freedom and creativity in others. Think of it like a train track. The rails constrain the train, but they also enable it to move forward with tremendous speed and efficiency. Your calendar is going to end up working the same way as we overhaul it. Most importantly, when used well, a calendar can alleviate cognitive load all the way down to 0. All of the flow triggers rely on one or both of these mechanisms. They either increase the neurochemicals dopamine and norepinephrine, or they lower cognitive load, which calendar surrender is going to reduce, which means it will drive you into flow with greater ease. By funneling it all into your calendar, you only have one thing to look at, one thing to stick to throughout your day. As you start to live by your calendar, you'll find yourself slipping into flow more often, but you'll also open up another kind of flow, where you can flow from event to event, thing to thing within your day without having to think, wonder, decide, scrutinize, analyze, question, or doubt how you are engaging with your life as it unfolds in any given moment. With calendar surrender, you turn your calendar into a mission control panel for peak performance, guiding you like NASA guides astronauts into space. So to set up the conditions for calendar surrender, here's what we're about to cover. First off, setting up the 7 key calendar categories for flow. Then upgrading rumination with decision autopilot, compressing your work hours, and then tracking the 12 flow habits. As we go through each of these steps, I want you to pause the video in between each step and follow along, implementing as we cover everything. We're going to get granular here. This is how this training works. It's not about watching these videos. It's about using these videos as a form of instruction and coaching so that you implement as we go. We want you to be here to take action that will get you results. We're in the business of change, not in the business of eliciting interesting epiphanies. So gear up and let's dive in. So the first thing we're going to do is set up your mission control panel for peak performance. I want you to go ahead and open up on your browser or your computer the calendar app that you use. If you're using Google Calendar, go to calendar.google.com and make sure you're logged in. If you're using a different app like Apple Calendar or Outlook, then open that up. Now, we're going to be using Google Calendar as the reference point for our instructions because that's what the majority of folks use, but all of this will apply regardless of what app you use, so don't worry about that. Pause the video if you need a minute to get your calendar up and running. Then we'll begin the first step of setting up your mission control panel for peak performance. So step 1 is to create the 7 key calendar categories for flow. We want to create 7 color-coded calendars in your calendar app. By creating these color-coded categories, you're going to be able to see, as we implement all of the rest of the steps that are coming, how you're spending your time from week to week. This is going to give you an immediate sense of whether you're moving toward your goals, and if not, why not? So what are the 7 categories? 7 categories are firstly goal-directed actions. We're going to have this be color green. Then we've got high leverage actions. Have this be blue. You're going to learn more about these as we go. You've got other work, which is going to be gray. Active recovery, purple. Sleep, dark blue. Social, yellow. Time evaporation is going to be red. So we want to create a category or a calendar within your calendar for each of these categories with all the corresponding colors that I just mentioned. Now let's quickly define these. Goal-directed actions are your highest priority tasks that directly contribute to your goals and drive you into flow. High leverage actions involve actions that will allow you to get more output value for less input cost over time. Other work is necessary, but non-goal directed work. Stuff like administrative tasks, emails, or mandatory meetings. Sleep and social are self-explanatory, but sleep is the flip side of flow, a state of high performance that helps create our flow state. We bake our flow state in the oven while we sleep. So we're going to be tracking sleep. And then time evaporation, which represents low value activities that don't serve your goals. These are the activities that suck up your time and energy without giving anything back. Maybe it's scrolling mindlessly through social media or getting caught up in office gossip. These activities go on your red calendar and your goal is to minimize them as much as possible, ideally all the way down to 0. And then there's active recovery, which includes activities that clear your allostatic load, the wear and tear on your body and brain that accumulates as you work, activating the parasympathetic nervous system and replenishing the expensive neurochemistry that you're going to be using up when in a flow state. Alrighty, so let's get these new calendars all set up. Here's how. In Google Calendar, find the plus sign next to other calendars on the left side of your screen, click it, and select Create New Calendar. Give your first calendar the name Goal Directed Actions and select a bright green color. Go ahead and pause the video and repeat this process to create the 6 other calendars using the names and the colors that we just mentioned. The colors are important because it's going to help you better diagnose at a glance through color theory where your time is being allocated. For now, don't worry about adding any events in your calendar. We're going to focus on that in a moment. And remember, throughout this training, you're going to be developing 12 key flow habits. These are the cornerstone behaviors that will give you consistent and reliable access to flow and peak performance every day so you can reach your goals in record time. In this module, we're going to be covering 3 flow habits: calendar surrender, work compression, and the power down ritual. And we'll cover these in detail in a moment. For now, just know that within your calendar, we'll show you how to mark whether you completed the flow habits for that day. No need for a separate habit tracking app or anything else. We're going to be covering that later. Okay, so by now, you should have your calendar open and ready to go. We've covered the 7 key categories you need to set up: goal-directed actions, high-leverage actions, other work, active recovery, sleep, social, and time evaporation. This is the base of your mission control panel for peak performance. Let's move on to populating these calendars, which brings us to the next step, mission control panel setup step 2, which is to identify every recurring event in your life. Okay, now that you have your color-coded calendars set up, it's time to start filling them in. So the first thing you're going to do is identify all the recurring events that happen in your life right now. All of the stuff you do, including stuff you would normally put in your to-do list, which we're going to have you scrap in favor of using your calendar instead. These recurring events are the things that happen on a regular basis, daily, weekly, monthly. Think about your sleep schedule. That's a recurring event, the sleep block that you have every night. Your workout routine, maybe you work out 3 times a week at roughly the same time. Put those in as recurring events. Family time that's consistent. Meal times. These are the building blocks of your day, and they form the foundation of your calendar. So take a moment now to brainstorm all the recurring events in your life that happen with consistency at roughly the same time. Grab a pen and paper or open up a document on your computer and start making a list. And don't worry about getting everything perfect right away. You can always come back and refine this later. We want to get a base down. The important thing is to get everything out of your head and onto paper or screen. So go ahead, pause the video and do this now before we move to the next step, which is mission control panel setup step 3, where we want to schedule all recurring events into your calendar. So once you have your list of recurring events, start plugging these events into your calendar. Open the calendar app back up and add these one by one, all of these events. If you go to bed at 10 p.m. every night and you wake up at 6 a.m., put that on your dark blue sleep calendar that we just created for you. If you hit the gym every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 a.m., add that to your purple active recovery calendar. Do the same for all other recurring events, including all of the repeated productive activities you want to experience flow within. If you have a standing lunch date with a colleague every Tuesday at noon, that goes on your yellow social calendar. Now let's get granular for a moment. Here's how to do this. Find the day and time block where you want to add your recurring event. For example, your 7 a.m. Monday, Wednesday, Friday workout. Click on the start time of your event. Drag your mouse down to the end time. A colored box representing your event will appear as you drag. Then release the mouse button, which is going to create a pop-up window to create your event. Enter the title. Select the calendar that's supposed to go on, which is going to be colored, for example, active recovery. And then click on the does not repeat option and set the event to repeat based on your desired schedule. If you're putting in sleep, it's obviously every night. If you're putting in the workout that's Monday, Wednesday, Friday, then it should repeat on that schedule, and click save to finalize the event. You should now see your recurring event on the correct days and times of your calendar. Keep going until you've scheduled all of your recurring events. We're accounting for the real recurring events that happen but might not usually be scheduled into your calendar, along with everything that already is scheduled in your calendar, obviously. And by the way, as you set up these recurring events, you want to minimize what's called Swiss cheese. Having bits of meetings here, bits of tasks there, instead of big chunks of time where you can engage in focused work, which is what we're going for. We're going to optimize that for you over time. To the extent that you can, batch the same types of work, which are determined by the mode of cognition that you're in. This means batching meetings together, batching focused work together, batching a workout and your recovery activities together, and so on. Don't worry about ironing out all of the Swiss cheese for now. We're going to work on it, as I said, over time, but be mindful of it as you set up your recurring events. It might take a little time, but trust me, it's worth it. Having these foundational elements in place will make it so much easier to build out the rest of your calendar and turn it into a mission control panel for peak performance. So pause the video if you need a few minutes to work through this step now. Alrighty, so by now, you should have created the 7 color-coded calendars for the key categories of goal-directed actions, high-leverage actions, other work, active recovery, sleep, social, and time evaporation. You've identified all the recurring events in your life, and you've put these recurring events into your calendar, repeating out into the future. The cool thing is, you're now going to be able to scroll 6 months or 2 years forward in your calendar, and you're going to have a bare bones schedule already built. This is the base of your life from which we're going to build. So now the fun begins. Let's start to maximize the amount of flow that you get in any given day. And that brings us to the next step of building your mission control panel for peak performance, which is step 4, achieving whole brain productivity with decision autopilot. Now, I want you to imagine for a moment this scenario. The alarm goes off and the question emerges to hit snooze or not. Strength prevails and you get up. But then another question emerges. Should I shower? Maybe I should stretch instead. You decide to shower after wondering for a moment. But then in the shower, you start ruminating about whether your friend thinks you're lame because you wore Crocs to the office the other day. And you wonder whether your boss thinks you're incompetent because they glanced at you funny during yesterday's meeting. Then after drying off, you think, what should I have for breakfast? Should I have what I ate yesterday or the day before? Or should I skip breakfast entirely? Or should I make a coffee? And if so, how should I make it? Maybe I should go order one or walk down to the coffee shop instead. You decide to have some food, and as you eat, you're ruminating about that random person from high school who liked one of your social media posts weeks ago. You wonder what they meant by liking that old photo from 10 years ago. Do they want to get back in touch? Should you message them? Will they think it was weird? Before going to work, you think, should I walk to work instead of driving, or should I carpool with the team? You glance down at your phone to call an Uber, and you see a message from your ex. You think, should I text back right away, or might that come across as a little funny? This is the internal rumination landscape most of us have most of the time. From the moment we wake up to the moment we go to bed, we're trying to answer minor, irrelevant, useless, trivial questions with our minds, filled with clutter that has nothing to do with our goals. The mind is busy coming up with solutions to problems even when idle, even while we sleep. But these problems relate to the trivialities of our routine, the trivialities of our social life, and other things from the external world, like the news, things we don't truly care about, that has nothing to do with the core of our work, that doesn't move us in any meaningful way towards our goals. That means that most of that rumination, which occurs almost all of the time when our consciousness is not fully engaged in a task, is unproductive. Now let's replay the previous scenario, but this time imagine that the only thing you had to think about was whatever your primary professional pursuit is, with every prior question answered immediately through pre-made decisions set up in your mission control panel calendar, and your mind cleared of all the clutter. So let's replay it again. The alarm goes off. On autopilot, you perform an optimal morning routine, having made every decision down to the seemingly trivial, like whether to shower before or after eating and exactly what clothes to wear. Courtesy of the default mode network, the part of the brain that's active during idle, non-focused moments, rumination does still occur, which means questions arise in the brain as you unconsciously perform these actions within your routine. But the questions now are of a different quality. While showering, your rumination landscape is occupied by the question, what is our strategy to triple the business over the next 5 years? While brushing your teeth, you think, is rebranding our new product a bigger priority now, or is rebuilding the way we sell it? While stretching, you think, what does Mary, my daughter, most need from me to make sure she navigates the next year in her teenage life in the healthiest way possible? These are the types of questions we want to occupy our rumination landscape. Over the long term, with a rumination landscape like this, where our mind is ruminating on our most important priorities rather than useless triviality, all sorts of possibilities open up. The more pointed your rumination becomes, the more creative and the better you will solve problems, even while you're not working, while your consciousness is disengaged from acute focus on a given task. Leveraging your rumination is a shift that the average professional rarely makes. They go through their entire career squandering most of their brain's creative and productive potential. They're like a puppet being pulled by the strings of random triviality and worry. The workplace Olympian, which is what you'll become as you go through this training, does something different. Workplace Olympians become their own puppet master and transform their rumination into a 24/7 problem-solving supercomputer that tirelessly works on problems related to their goals. This transition from a clogged rumination landscape to a clear, creative, and constructive one has a name. It's called upgrading your rumination. When you upgrade your rumination, you transform mind wandering into problem solving. You make your idle thoughts work for you instead of against you. Most of us equate productivity to when the task positive network in the brain is fired up, when we're honed in on a given task. But what about the default mode network, which is actively engaged when we're disengaged, when we're idle? This comprises most of our waking life. We tend to engage in a sort of productivity discrimination where we bias and prioritize task positive network-based focused productivity over default mode network-based diffuse disengaged productivity. But the irony is that the DMN-based productivity accounts for more total hours of productivity. We're awake 112 hours a week. For roughly 40 of those hours, our task positive network is engaged and we're actually focused on something directly. That means that for 72 waking hours, our attention is dislodged and the default mode network is active, ruminating. Literally 64% of your waking life, 20% more time than the hours you work, are at the mercy of your DMN. What is that rumination allocated to? And what good do you get out of that time? Well, when we view productivity through the lens of the DMN as well as the TPN, we see productivity in a whole new light. It becomes whole brain or 360-degree round-the-clock productivity. And all of that work goes towards our priorities and goals, which accelerate our progress toward them. With upgraded rumination, we can redirect default mode network time to creatively solve our top problems. By transforming idle moments into productive rumination, we can generate a constant flow of new ideas and turn daydreaming into problem solving. We can even cut down the amount of time we spend actively working with the TPN because the quality of our thinking will become so high. When you upgrade your rumination, you weaponize your idle cognition. Think of it like this. Your mind functions like a problem vacuum. It'll suck problems into it, and it will cycle on those problems endlessly for hours when you're idle. This is going to happen one way or another, whether we like it or not. So rather than leave this to chance, we can make sure that the problem vacuum of our mind sucks productive questions into it. Now, in order to do this, we have to address how we handle decisions. So let's return our attention to the building of our mission control panel for peak performance, our calendar. And remember, so far, we've set up our 7 calendar categories for flow and added all of our recurring routines and events into our calendar. Now, to upgrade our rumination, we're going to go into any repeated routine and recurring event, identifying every single microscopic action within it. And we're going to add those details to our calendar within the event. Why? Well, it's estimated that the average adult makes about 35,000 conscious decisions every day. And researchers at Cornell University estimate we make about 226 decisions each day only on food. And we all know that making too many decisions depletes our willpower. But decision making also increases cognitive load, and it tilts our attention from being divergent and creative to convergent and jagged, which blocks flow and distorts our ability to productively ruminate. We usually view decisions as nothing because they appear automatically in our minds, but decisions are actually resource-intensive tasks. We underestimate this because they aren't necessarily time-intensive, or they don't seem to be, and they definitely aren't physically intensive. What we want to do, though, is start to reframe how we view decisions and think of them more like physical tasks. Viewing a decision almost like bending down and picking up a heavy box, because from a cognitive perspective, that is what it's like. Seen this way, it encourages us to minimize the number of decisions we have to make. We can set things up once and let them run indefinitely without exerting additional cognitive energy. This is how we maintain an upgraded rumination landscape. And doing this is called decision autopilot. Decision autopilot is about detailing sequential micro decisions within any given routine to eliminate the what's next thinking within all our routines, rituals, and patterns throughout the day. Decision autopilot is like a script you can run for your routines so that your upgraded rumination is free to diverge, never interrupted by the need to stop, converge, and devote cognitive energy to making inconsequential choices like whether to stretch or shower or have breakfast first within a routine that you already know you're going to run. Now, consider Immanuel Kant, who's an amazing example of decision autopilot. He was one of the most influential minds in Western philosophy, upon which almost all of science has been built. His ideas shaped our understanding of knowledge, ethics, and the very nature of reality itself. Now, Kant had a daily routine that he stuck to with religiosity, and every detail of each routine was dialed in. At 5 a.m., servant of 9 years, Martin Lamp, woke Kant up. The old soldier was under orders to never let Kant sleep a minute longer. Kant found it hard to get up early, but he had made the decision once and applied it to all of his future mornings. After getting up, Kant would drink some tea. Afterward, and never before, he smoked a pipe, always one of tobacco, and his smoking time was devoted to meditation. He then prepared his lectures and worked on his books until 7 a.m. He'd lecture until 11 a.m. With the lectures finished, He worked again on his writings until after lunch. After lunch, he'd take a walk and spend the rest of the afternoon with his friend Green. After going home, he would do some light work and reading. Now, how was Kant able to generate ideas so profound that he shaped the fabric of reality within which we all live? Well, it's partly because he devoted no time to making recurrent decisions within recurring rituals. The details of his daily routines were explicit, running on autopilot. Kant's work laid the epistemological and metaphysical foundations upon which nearly all subsequent Western philosophy and science has been built. The fact that he was able to do this while adhering to a strict, almost monastic daily routine is a testament to the power of decision autopilot. Now, this may sound rigid, but again, this is what's called a liberating constraint, where we're bounding our life in one domain to unlock increased freedom that we actually end up valuing more in another domain. Liberating constraints can be applied to many domains: creativity, health and fitness, finances, relationships, skill development, all sorts of different areas. For Kant, his liberating constraint was his daily routine, dialed down to the details, so he had the freedom to wrestle with civilization-shaping ideas that continue to resonate. Decision autopilot eliminates micro-uncertainty and those jaggedy, halting moments of what's next that happen semi-subconsciously, yet trip up our cognition endlessly. So here's how to set up these liberating constraints so you can maintain upgraded rumination and have your mind function as a problem-solving supercomputer during your idle moments. Take the routines you're already doing and make the micro decisions within them explicit. You can start with any repeated routine: your morning routine, your lunchtime routine, your afternoon workout, your evening wind down, your pre-bed routine, whatever it is that's consistent throughout the day. And then what I want you to do is determine the details and the sequences of actions within those routines, then write those details down directly into the calendar event itself in the notes or description section. What you want is to remove all should I or shouldn't I decisions from your routine. It's the cluster of decisions within one routine that you're automating here. For example, during your morning ritual, do you get water and drink a glass of it before meditating? Or do you get water before you shower so that you can urinate after showering? Do you have a quick snack in between showering and meditating? These are the micro decisions within a routine that we're going to make explicit and decide upon in advance. The more explicit the sequence, the smoother it is to perform the routine without clogging up your rumination. Intuitively, we think that these micro decisions are trivial. Who cares? The thing is, though, they add up and they alter the kind of cognition we end up inhabiting. The amount of information processing required goes up unnecessarily. Cumulatively, they deplete cognitive energy, increase cognitive load, and end up inhibiting access to flow. So we don't want to avoid having to shift from divergent to convergent thinking when we don't have to. This kind of ping-pong cognition is jagged. We want soft, flowing cognition. So list out every micro decision within the routine. That way, your mind is free to dream, explore, and create. As a huge bonus, optimal habits end up becoming easier. You're offloading dozens of unimportant, seemingly harmless decisions that actually are harmful because they add up invisibly and reduce flow. Now, here's an example. Maybe you wake up at 9 a.m. and your routine is learning and coffee. What you would write down in this case in a bulleted list is grab headphones, pull up Audible, press play on the current book that's pre-downloaded, heat the water, grind the coffee, sip and walk while you learn. Again, you want all the information you need to be right in front of you within the event in your calendar so you don't have to reference anything else. The decision is already made for you and you can just mindlessly execute each element. You're predetermining and offloading dozens of barely visible micro decisions that disrupt and downgrade your rumination. So here's exactly what to do. Open up your calendar right now, the one we just built. Look for all the recurring events or routines that you've scheduled. Again, your morning routine, your lunchtime routine, your workout routine, if you do that every day. Maybe you have a meditation practice, you do that every day. You can map it out for that. Your wind down before bed or your dinner routine. Now, tap or click on the event in your calendar that you have for that routine, because ideally, again, you've set up the recurring events for all of these routines in place already. You should see fields like title, location, attendees, and so on. There should be an empty section that says description or notes. That's where we're going to break down this routine into its atomic steps. You'll be typing these decisions autopilot details directly into that field within your calendar. Start at the very beginning of your routine. What's the first physical action you take? We want to break down our recurring routine into these specific sequential actions. For example, for your morning routine, you might have steps like meditate for 10 minutes, stretch for 5 minutes, take a shower, get dressed, make a protein shake. The more detailed and sequential, the better. Spell out the exact order of actions within the routine. For each action, type it into your calendar within the event, then hit return to start a new bullet point. Continue until you've detailed your entire morning routine from start to finish, then save the event. Once you've spelled out the entire sequence, take a final look, make sure it's correct, make sure it's sufficiently detailed that you didn't miss anything, and then click save or done, and boom, you've now created an automatic script your brain can follow without having to waste precious energy on making decisions. When it's time to do that routine, you're going to simply pull up the event and execute each step one bullet at a time. Now, obviously, over time, you're going to know what these steps are. You're not going to need to look at your calendar every time, but sometimes you're going to wake up incredibly fatigued or after having had a crazy day the day before, feeling disorganized. And in those moments, even if it's months and months after having executed the same routine every day with automaticity, it's helpful to quickly glance at the calendar and boom, drop straight back into automaticity, executing each element with an almost semi-subconscious level of fluidity. This is the essence of calendar surrender, which frees up your mind to productively ruminate on bigger things, because during these moments, rather than wondering, do you shower before you stretch, etc., you can dream big, you can think, you can have the problem vacuum of your mind occupied by questions that relate to your boldest goals. Now, repeat this for every single recurring event or routine in your calendar. Go ahead and pause the video to do this now. Over time, this will unlock another kind of flow, a continuous flow of divergent cognition, uninterrupted by the need to ping pong and jaggedly converge on trivial decisions or ponder triviality that doesn't relate to your goals. This allows your attention to expand out like a fog across a sea, so thoughts meander to the far reaches of your consciousness. And it's on these peripheries, the edges of your cognition, where the creativity and insight that unlocks your goals lives. Your next big idea is waiting for you, lingering out on the horizon of your attention. When you upgrade your rumination through decision autopilot, rather than ruminating on nothingness, you will find treasured insight, treasure that's been sitting there at the edges of your consciousness the entire time, but it's been blocked by trivial decision making. So let's take a quick step back for a moment and appreciate how far you've come in setting up your mission control panel for peak performance. So far, you've created 7 color-coded calendars, you've scheduled recurring events, and you've upgraded your rumination and put your routines and recurring events on decision autopilot. So you're ready to take the next crucial step in mastering the flow cycle, which is compressing your work hours and setting hard start and finish lines for your work. That brings us to mission control panel setup, compressing your work hours. Now, a few years ago, a friend of mine tried building a startup. He tapped his entire network, including his close friends and family, and he managed to secure 10 million in venture capital funding. He was living his childhood dream and now had more capital than he ever imagined to be able to make this dream a reality. And he was blazing ahead, building the business, making unbelievable progress, all until one day when he woke up and could barely get out of bed. He was hit with Lyme disease. From there on, it was fever, chills, fatigue. His body ached all over. His brain started breaking down. Imagine strapping into a roller coaster full of thrill and anticipation, only to jerk to a halt midway up the first big climb. Imagine the faces of his friends, family, and investors strapped in with him, their savings and trust riding on his shoulders, but with his physiology blocking him from moving forward. The ride just stops. All of a sudden, he was on the hook to get a return for all the most important people in his life, but he could barely get out of bed. He was used to working 12 to 16-hour days, which he thought was a necessity to get his company to function and to be able to provide a return for his investors by making it successful. But now he could barely manage 3-hour workdays. That's all his Lyme-ridden body and brain could tolerate. But then something crazy started to happen. He noticed that as he was doing these 3-hour workdays, some positive things started to emerge. First off, he started seeing more clearly. Things that previously seemed important became obviously less important. or even completely irrelevant altogether. Things he thought only he could do, he now realized he could pass off to others. He started working in a dramatically different way on dramatically different things. It was almost as if he had put on productivity goggles, allowing him to see in HD what was actually important, what wasn't, and how to most effectively do that which is most essential. The important tasks popped out at him like a neon sign in a desert night. The trivial ones started fading into oblivion. And even though he was only working for 3 hours, he actually got more done, way more, than when he was putting in 12-hour days fueled by caffeine burning the candle at both ends. So what happened here? Well, it's like running a race. When you know there's a finish line, you sprint. And the tighter the finish line is, the faster you run. This is what happened with my friend. Due to the Lyme disease, my friend's work had contracted so much that he had to sprint in order to complete it. And he ended up proving something that's critical to understand for flow and peak performance overall, which is that hours don't equal outcomes. Hours worked doesn't lead to outcomes achieved. And we know this. The wildly successful people among us are a testament. They're proof of this. There are folks that are 1,000 or 10,000 times more productive than their peers, than their competitors, but they don't work 1,000 times more hours. They can't. They can only work double at most. So we know that hours can't be the thing that determines productivity and output. And paradoxically, one of the biggest blockers and impediments to peak performance is thinking that hours inputted is a primary driver of productivity. Our minds find this stupefyingly counterintuitive. This is because of linearity bias, the assumption that a change in one quantity produces a proportional change in another. Because of this, we believe that cause and effect have a linear relationship, where if we put an hour in, we'll get 1 unit of whatever it is out. Or if we put 16 hours in, we'll get 16 units of whatever it is out. But research shows the opposite is the case. Additional hours often lead to decreased total output because average productivity decreases to the extent that the additional hours worked provide no benefit or can even be detrimental. In other words, the more you work, the worse you work. It's nonlinear. Stress will set in eventually and you'll perform worse and worse on increasingly pointless tasks. Exhaustion comes next, where we make poor decisions and mistakes that have to be cleaned up later. Kind of like overwatering a plant where we think we're helping it by watering it all the time, but we're actually drowning it. And as my friend discovered, the equation for work isn't linear. It's not more hours equals more productivity. It's more like more inputs equal more productivity. But hours worked is only one possible input. Multiple inputs can produce the desired output you're seeking, no matter what that output is, whether it's business growth or a book being written or any other goal that you may have. Hours worked are only one input of many. And when you shrink your reliance on the hours worked input down forcefully, like the Lyme disease forced my friend to do, you're forced to start drawing on other inputs that will produce the output that you're wanting. And this is great news, because other inputs have less of a life cost than the hours worked input, since time, in a sense, is all you have. But in order to actually draw on these other inputs, you have to force the limitation of the hours worked input down. Otherwise, you'll naturally default back to increasing your hours worked to get more output. You've almost got to handcuff yourself from doing this, putting yourself in a straitjacket that prevents you from continually leaning on the hours worked input to get more output. When we can't just grind out more hours, we start focusing on other inputs that move the needle and elevate our output, like better decision making, deeper focus, faster working, smarter use of our energy, more time spent on strategy and judgment, determining what we should be working on in the first place. What's even more counterintuitive is that the only way that we can tap into these other inputs that drive maximum productivity is by putting in place a forcing function, like my friend's Lyme disease did for him. That forcing function is something called work compression. Work compression means building a work container with a start and finish line and always stopping work once you reach the finish line. Like a runner, you're not going to keep running past the finish line. You stop the second you cross it. What this means is picking a specific number of hours that you're going to allow yourself to work in a given week that is less than you currently work, hence it being work compression, and then never ever, no matter what, working over that amount. And a minute more, no matter the circumstances. By setting this boundary, you create a container for all your work, which forces you to concentrate your efforts within that fixed time frame. Out of necessity, you're forced to unlock and use the other inputs beyond hours worked to amplify your productivity exponentially instead of linearly. Now, there are 3 surprising reasons why work compression works so well, which are key to building your mission control panel for peak performance. The first reason is that when your hours are limited by creating a compressed work container, something called perceived importance increases. Research from Michael Bartholomew and Johannes Keller from Ulm University have found that perceived importance drives flow state. That's because, in part, when our subjective assessment of a task's significance or value is high, we are more motivated to pay attention to it, invest effort in it, and sustain focus on it. All of which are prerequisites to flow and increase our likelihood of getting into flow within that task. But here's the thing. You can only tap into a 10 out of 10 level of perceived importance by compressing the hours that we allow ourselves to work down and voluntarily doing what my friend who had been overcome by Lyme disease was forced to do. The second thing that happened to my friend, which will happen to you as you compress your work hours, is that you end up tuning the challenge skills balance. This is one of flow's most potent triggers, so much so that Mihai Csikszentmihalyi considered it a precondition necessary for flow to occur at all. We must perceive that our skills are sufficient to meet the perceived challenge. Too much challenge leads to overwhelm and anxiety. Too little challenge leads to apathy, to boredom. The best way to tune this balance is to exceed what you're normally capable of, if only slightly. 4% is the sweet spot. Increased challenge demands increased skills. Decreased hours increase the challenge and in turn force you to increase your skills. So this combination of perceived importance and a better regulated challenge skills balance can not just drive flow, but intensify it. And Bartholomew and Johannes, the researchers we just mentioned, suggest that flow intensity is dependent on, firstly, the degree of the perceived fit between individual skills and task demands or challenges, and secondly, the subjective value assigned to the task, which is perceived importance that we just touched on. But as you do this, you don't want to push it too far. As my partner Stephen Collar says, you want to stretch but not snap. To not snap, you have to stop. That is, stop working, which leads us to the third benefit of work compression, which is recovery. We know the flow state, again, the most productive state that we can access as human beings, happens as part of a 4-stage cycle. That cycle starts with struggle, then we've got release, the flow state itself, and then the recovery phase on the back end. And most people can't get into flow because they can't recover properly or aren't recovering at all. And you can probably resonate with this. It's likely quite rare that you don't feel this overhanging productivity guilt, this sense of an obligation to produce at all times. But here's the thing, true time off, deep physiological recovery only occurs when that constant gnawing obligation to work, to achieve goals, to be in pursuit of productivity is fully put on pause. This backdrop of insistence to work and achieve is the core driver of productivity guilt. In the brain, it causes a constant drip of cortisol and norepinephrine, which puts us in a permanent low-grade state of sympathetic activation, subtle fight or flight. When you set hard start and finish lines for your workday, you're not allowing yourself to work during certain hours no matter what, regardless of what pops up. During these times, you are forcing yourself off the clock, and thus you remove the obligation to work and to make progress. And so you escape productivity guilt, which deepens recovery, which is important because we know from the psychological literature that when it comes to producing results over the long haul in any endeavor, consistency beats intensity. The person who works out 2 days a week, every week for a year, will smother the person who works out ferociously 7 days a week for the first month of the year and then doesn't work out for the rest of the year. And the same goes for flow. You'll get into flow more if you don't overdo the intensity, if you don't overclock it. Underdo your time in flow, slightly overdo your time in recovery relative to what feels intuitive, and you'll get more flow more consistently. So remember, recovery is part of the work. It isn't surrendering to fatigue, it's strategic resource replenishment. And we're going to cover recovery much deeper later, but the rule for now is compress your work hours to expand up your output. Once you can no longer resort to working more hours, this whole new mindset will open up where you will start leaning for the input of hours worked less, and you'll start leaning on the inputs like working faster, working with deeper focus, being more strategic about what you work on, being more intentional about what you eliminate, getting more work done for less hours inputted. But part of how this recalibration occurs is through pain. The forcing function of work compression and the pain that results will create a resource recalibration where hours worked will be deprioritized and other resources you possess, like the inputs that we just mentioned that are currently underutilized, attention, focus, strategy, judgment, quality decision-making will increase. But without the forcing function of working fewer hours and feeling the pain of it, this recalibration won't happen properly. And I'll give you an example of this. When scaling my first business, the amount of work was incredibly excessive, handling marketing, product, sales, operations, customer service. But again, I had this experience, seeing my friend's productivity and output increase because of the constraints and work compression that his Lyme disease caused. He told me how much of a game changer it had been. So I was determined to stick to the fixed allotment of hours and the start and work finish line that I had set for myself. And I remember one day, about 2 days into this experiment, I had a customer service email that I was halfway through writing as my alarm rang to let me know that I had worked my fixed number of hours for the day and I'd hit the work finish line. And I felt insane not finishing that email and taking an extra 15 or 20 minutes to just finish writing it. But I thought, look, I'm running this experiment. I'm going to do it anyway. It felt utterly stupid and irresponsible, but I stuck to the experiment. I closed my laptop and headed home for the day. And you know what? I realized just 24 hours later in this instance that it was actually better that I didn't send that email, because the pain of having not got back to that customer elicited an insight that I should build an FAQ section on the website that would have answered that customer's inquiry and any future one like it. Because I insisted on work compression, it forced my brain to problem solve, drawing on other inputs to produce output rather than more hours worked, allowing me to see more clearly and thus unlock a higher level of leverage and productivity in future. However, if I had allowed myself to break my rule and finish that email, my brain would not have been forced into a corner to use non-time-based resources to solve that problem. And I had countless little pains and adjustments like this occur, such that by the time I was 2 weeks in, I tripled my output while working 3 times less in terms of hours. It was in experiencing these pains of work not done because of hitting the work finish line that the benefits of work compression occurred, which increased perceived importance, tuned the challenge skills balance, and then obviously allowed me to have much better, deeper recovery, because after the finish line, I was banned from work entirely. And now whenever I'm under stress and need to increase my productivity, this is the equation I try and default to that I recommend for you too. When you want to multiply output, subtract hours. This is the opposite of what's intuitive. It grates against linearity bias. But again, the only way you can boost the skills that drive exponential output is the subtraction of hours. So don't be alarmed if everything goes sideways the first week to month you do work compression. You may miss some deadlines. You may get in trouble a little bit. You may not get all the work done. Your results may even suffer in the short term, but that's okay. That's a sign you're sticking to the process and you're stopping work when you hit the finish line. This is what's going to make it work. This pain is the source of the behavioral change that will lead to the benefit and alter how you think about work, forcing you to draw on non-time-based inputs. Pain is what my friend had to feel and what I had to experience to do this, to alter our thinking and wean off using more hours worked to get more output achieved. Neuroscience backs this up. The initial stress and failures you experience catalyze adaptive learning. As you do this, you'll see that work compression results in an automatic skill upgrade, an effortless level up of these internal skills that others waste time trying to develop separately. It's more powerful to force this change, and you do that by living and dying by the arbitrary work container that you build with your work start and finish line. So how do you actually do this? Here's how to set up your work container. Open up your calendar app right now. Create 2 new recurring events for every work day that you have within the 7 days of your calendar. Work start line and then work finish line. You want to have these be 15-minute events, just so they're little strips on your calendar. And then set the work start line to the time you plan to start working each day. And set the work finish line to when you commit to stopping working each day, no matter what. These lines are recurring events on the calendar. with the work finish line being the cap on your work hours. Now, here's the key. Make sure the amount of hours you choose to work is at least 25% less than the amount that you work right now. For example, let's say you work from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Take the total hours, in this case 8 hours, and multiply it by 0.75, which is going to equal 6 hours. That may mean your work container is now 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. So set your work start line at 10 a.m. and your work finish line at 4 p.m. These events will serve as your daily work container. Consider your energy levels throughout the day and when you tend to be most focused. If you're a morning person, maybe your work start line is at 8 a.m. and your work finish line is at 2 p.m. Maybe you don't have that schedule flexibility because of team members or whatever the case may be. But if you hit your stride in the afternoons, you might want to try 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. or later on entirely. It's going to depend on you and what your individual situation is. The key is to make it a 25% smaller work container than you're used to, at least 25% smaller. I encourage you to go even more aggressive. Maybe try working half the amount of hours you're currently working. And remember, you are shrinking your workday so that you recalibrate away from hours worked as an input to other inputs to producing whatever output it is that you're working on. So go ahead, pause the video to set up your work start and finish lines as recurring events at the beginning and at the end of the workday so that you know when to begin and when to end no matter what. And then next, look at all your existing recurring meetings and events. Do any of them fall outside your new start and finish times? If so, try and reschedule them. Move them into your work container or move your work container around them. You got to move things around, kind of like a puzzle, until they all fit neatly within this work container defined by the start line and the finish line. This might take some negotiation with colleagues or clients, but it's a crucial step and it's worth the time, investment, and the hassle up front. Because remember, the goal is to have all our work contained between the start and the finish line. Think of it like playing Tetris. In Tetris, to fit the blocks in, you can't just expand out the total size of the box. You got to be good at fitting them in. It's the same thing here. And this constraint will force you to be more strategic and efficient with your time. You'll start to see tasks in terms of their importance and urgency and slot them in accordingly. It's a game of prioritization and focus. So go ahead, pause the video now to make these adjustments. So you're doing great. And there's a lot here. By now, you've locked in your new work hours, rescheduled meetings outside those hours, and blocked out focus time in your calendar. One final step for setting up work compression is to set an alarm on your phone for your work finish line. So go ahead and pause the video and do this now. Now let's zoom out a bit. So far in this mission control panel setup process, you've color-coded your calendar into 7 key categories. You've scheduled all recurring events. You've upgraded your rumination with Decision Autopilot. And most recently, established your daily work start line and work finish line. You've learned the neuroscience behind why compressing your work hours is so effective for maximizing productivity and flow. You understand how it increases perceived importance, tunes the challenge skills balance, and enables deeper recovery, the key ingredients for consistent access to flow. If you trust this process and surrender to your calendar, you'll watch your output expand as your work hours contract. Now, when your work finish line alarm goes off, it's time to do your power down ritual. This brings us to the next critical step and the final one. We're nearly there in building your mission control panel for peak performance and flow. And that is mission control panel setup step 6, to set up your power down ritual. The purpose of the power down ritual is to separate planning from doing. Most professionals approach their work life like machine gunners against a horde of zombies in a video game. They pray and spray, having to react to every zombie as a matter of life or death, shooting bullets all over the place and hoping they hit some targets. When you become goal-directed, you become more like a sniper. You're high up in the sniper's nest, able to survey the whole landscape through your scope without hurry. You can then take a deep breath, hone in, and knock out the goal-directed target efficiently with one single pull of a trigger. To move from reacting to deciding, we need to separate planning from doing, which requires different modes of cognition. Divergent thinking is creative, where we link disparate and far-flung ideas to form something new. Convergent thinking is when our attention narrows in on a single thing. Both states are critical, but they don't blend well together. We want to use one or the other. Diverge when planning, converge with doing. Separating these two brain states frees us to act without questioning whether or not what we're about to do is the best thing we could do. According to Daniel Kahneman's Dual process theory, our cognition involves two distinct systems, the fast intuitive system 1 for doing and the slow analytical system 2 for planning. Separating planning and doing allows each system to function optimally without interference and kind of tripwiring each other. Separating planning from doing also eliminates reactivity. The more strategic you are, the less often reactionary tasks occur. You then get to treat your work as a race and sprint freely to your finish line. This clarity reduces overwhelm and prevents you from working excessive hours, and it improves your quality of life immensely. You don't need to do as many things when you find goal-directed actions that advance you toward your goals. The output is far greater than all the clutter that accumulates when we're not strategic. When in doubt, invest more in planning and less in doing. The Power Down ritual is a structured part of your day that's devoted to planning. It's a 5-step process that should take no longer than 30 minutes. Now, before we dive into the steps, first, open your calendar app up. You're going to schedule a new event. This is your Power Down ritual, a crucial step to ensure you end your day in a way that sets you up for tomorrow. Here's how to do it. Starting today, click on the time 30 minutes before your work finish line. Recurring event that we've just scheduled in. If your finish line is at 6 p.m., you want to start this at about 5:30 p.m. Every day is a recurring event. Then create a new event by clicking on the Create button or double-clicking on the time slot. Title this event Power Down Ritual, and then set it to recur daily every workday under the work finish line. And from now on, you're always going to run this Power Down ritual right before your work finish line. The duration should be set for 30 minutes, and add a reminder by setting an alert for 5 minutes before it starts to make sure that you wrap up whatever you're working on and transition smoothly into your Power Down ritual and finish work with your work finish line. Then save the event. Now this is part of your day. It's protected, just like your start and your finish lines. You've just created a structured ending to your daily work routine. And this ritual will become a cornerstone of winding down effectively and winding up your ability to produce and perform for the following day. And it directly supports the 4 pillars of flow by clearing cognitive load, which you're going to do in your Power Down ritual, setting clear goals for the next day, ensuring you have a work start line and work finish line. You prepare yourself to maximize flow states and achieve peak performance. Now, there are 5 things you'll do as part of the Power Down ritual. First is to pinpoint tomorrow's goal-directed actions. The second is to schedule your day with goal-directed actions as the priority. The third is to set clear goals and take the first step of the first step within your goal-directed actions. And then the next is to clear your cognitive load. And finally, track your flow habits. We're going to go through each phase one at a time and give you instructions along the way whenever you need to pause the video to set something up. But first, within the Power Down ritual recurring calendar event that you just created, type the 5 phases of the Power Down ritual directly into the notes or description of the event, kind of like we did with Decision Autopilot. And those are, again, pinpoint tomorrow's goal-directed actions, schedule your day, etc., etc. The list that we just went through and that you're seeing here, get those all into the calendar in the notes or description section and have that be recurring so you can see exactly what the components of your Power Down ritual are easily within your calendar at a click. The first phase of your Power Down ritual is to pinpoint your goal-directed actions for the next workday. Now, one year on a flight back from Ireland to the US, I was looking at my journal from the previous year. And what I saw emphasized again and again was how important and high leverage it would have been that year to recruit a CMO for my business at the time. I knew that the company depended on landing a qualified CMO before our rivals did. For every hour I wasn't investing in finding this person, top-notch candidates were getting scooped up and competitors were gaining an advantage. And I knew all of this. And yet, when I looked at my calendar from the past year, I saw something shocking. I spent 2 hours a week at most on activities related to finding, interviewing, and vetting a CMO. The gap between what I flagged in my journal as being hugely important and how I actually spent my time was appalling. This gap between intention and action is caused by something called goal displacement. Goal displacement is a psychological phenomenon where you lose sight of the goals you've set and drift away from them, often with the goals being replaced by less important ones. Goal displacement is a concept explored in depth by Dr. Edwin Locke and Dr. Gary Latham in their work on goal-setting theory that they pioneered in the 60s and published in The American Psychologist. And goal displacement is one of the main reasons people never achieve their goals. It feels like setting course to a destination, but meandering on scenic byways instead of driving there directly via the highway. It's a shocking punch to the gut to find out the reality of how you spend your time and what you deem is important. This is often caused by time optimism bias, the tendency to believe we'll invest more time and effort into something than we actually do. This causes us to give ourselves way too much credit about how good we are at using our time. This time optimism bias leads to goal displacement. You know how when you send someone a Venmo, or you get money transferred into your bank account, it's automatically calculated and logged. Well, unlike money, by default, time doesn't get logged. It's not calculated unless we calculate it. This makes it much more difficult to track, monitor, and allocate. As a result, by default, we're so bad at allocating time and monitoring where it's going that if we were equivalently bad with finances, we would be going into future-threatening debt. So goal displacement isn't something we can fix entirely. Rather, it's an ongoing dichotomy that we want to manage. We want to continuously assess the gap between our intentions and our actions, our intentions and time allocation to prevent goal displacement. Now, thankfully, the solution is deceptively simple. Pinpointing tomorrow's goal-directed actions today, which is the first part of running your power down ritual. Unlike everyday tasks that keep you busy but not truly progressing, goal-directed actions are the tasks that directly propel you toward where you want to go. A goal-directed action has the highest level of progression toward whatever goal you're trying to attain out of any task you can conceivably think of. It's an action that, when completed, directly brings you one step closer to that long-term goal and does so more quickly and rapidly and certainly than any other task you can conceive of. It's the domino that knocks down the next domino in line. If we're engaging in tasks that aren't properly goal-directed, we're the equivalent of a hamster on a wheel, a lot of activity and movement, but ultimately not going anywhere. There's the illusion of progress through motion, but no true advancement. Well, think of your productivity as a car. Elite performers spend nearly all of their time driving directly to their destination, taking the best route possible. On the other hand, most people spend a tiny percentage of their time driving directly to their destination. 90% is spent driving in circles and up cul-de-sacs, turning down the wrong roads, or even crashing into trees and reversing. To illustrate this, I remember during my early years in business, I was at a business mastermind at Powder Mountain in Utah. I was observing two different entrepreneurs who had the same goal of building an 8-figure business and the same level of ambition and desire to achieve that goal. And they were even in the same industry. Now, I'll keep their names private, but here's a snapshot of how they spent their days at the time. Entrepreneur A wakes up and spends 15 minutes wondering what the most important thing might be to work on. Then they take a break from wondering about it and answer all her email. Then she has a hunch that it might be good to improve her branding because one of the emails she just responded to and mentioned that branding had some room for improvement. So she spends 90 minutes on that. Then she gets on a call with her team and oversees what they're doing. Then decides it could be good to explore expanding their social media presence. So she spends a few hours researching vendors and calling them up. After talking to a few of the vendors, she decides that actually it's not worth trying to find and hire one, and instead that she will go and work on a different marketing channel instead. She's floating through her day like a leaf in the wind without clear direction. Now, entrepreneur B knows that from the day before, the single goal for the business right now is to increase lead generation. She also knows that the single most important way to do that is to focus on the most effective marketing channel, which she knows is Facebook ads. She also knows that the most important way to improve the Facebook ads is rewriting all the ads. So she wakes up, sits down for 3 hours, rewrites every ad, sends them to her team member to implement, ties up the final loose ends, like clearing her email and responding to her team, and then finishes the day. The night before, she determined everything, and before checking anything, she attacked that one thing that she knows is the thing that will drive her toward the 8-figure goal more than anything else. Once completed, she does whatever maintenance stuff she needs to do, and then she finishes. The difference between the success of those two entrepreneurs isn't how much they work. They wake up and have the same 24 hours to work with. Rather, the actions they take are radically different. The most important thing, the goal-directed action, is not incrementally more important than everything else. It's incomparably more important than everything else. Performing goal-directed actions while in a flow state is the cornerstone of peak performance. This is really what the game of peak performance and amplifying productivity boils down to. It's identifying effectively what the goal-directed actions are, it's prioritizing them above everything else, and it's getting into flow so that we can do them more quickly and effectively. That's really the core of what we're trying to do here, or at least the core that will amplify your productivity. Now, once in flow, Within a goal-directed action, our productivity and creativity will increase thanks to being in flow state, of course. So we are both working on the best possible thing that we can work on to lead us directly to the goals, while also in the most effective state of consciousness possible. Goal-directed actions also ramp up perceived importance. Recall that perceived importance is one of the key mechanisms through which your daily work container boosts productivity. Perceived importance increases dopamine, which heightens your motivation and concentration. This leads to greater attention paid to the task, which in turn leads to faster entry into flow state. The more goal-directed your actions, the greater the dopamine release and the more flow you get. So the step here is to identify the most critical goal-directed actions for the following day. These should be the tasks that have the greatest impact on your long-term goals. Now, here's the key. You will decide on no more than 3 goal-directed actions, and just one is perfectly fine and encouraged. It's a maximum of 3. By limiting yourself to 1 to 3 goal-directed actions per day, you're forced to identify the absolute most important tasks that will move the needle on your goals the most. When you limit yourself to just 1 to 3 truly essential goal-directed actions, you give each task the space to become a flow-triggering focal point. And productivity is completely non-linear. It's unevenly distributed. There isn't usually 5, 6, 7, 10 things that are most essential to move you forward towards something for the day. Usually there's one thing that is 10 or 100 times more important than everything else. So forcing yourself to find just 1 to 3 goal-directed actions is a way of forcing yourself to be discriminate about what actually matters so you can separate the wheat from the chaff. So here's exactly how to plan out your 1 to 3 goal-directed actions for the next workday. First off, open your calendar. Then review your long-term goals. Quickly go over the goals you've set for yourself. If needed, grab a notepad and pen and write these long-term goals down. We'll do a deeper dive on setting these goals later, but for now, just come up with a general sense of what these goals are. Next, consider what specific actions you could take tomorrow that would directly move you closer to those long-term goals. These are your potential goal-directed actions. Aim for tasks that are challenging, yet achievable with your current skills. For example, if your goal is to increase sales, a goal-directed action might be to rewrite the sales email sequence. From your list of potential actions, select the top 1 to 3 that would have the greatest impact on your goals. These are your goal-directed actions for tomorrow. These goal-directed actions don't have to be perfect. We'll refine them along the way. Just do your best approximation for now. And if you're not sure where to start, pick a key project and ask, if I complete this tomorrow, what other tasks will it unlock or make much easier? Those are your goal-directed actions. And remember, the key is to separate planning from doing. By identifying your goal-directed actions the day before, you free your mind to focus mindlessly on execution the day of. No more wasting energy deciding what to do in the moment. I know it can be tempting to skip this planning step, especially when you're busy. But trust me, investing this 10 minutes will save you hours of wasted effort. You'll start each day with clarity and purpose, ready to get into flow and make meaningful progress on what actually matters most. That's the power of goal-directed action. Okay, so you've scheduled your Power Down ritual as a recurring event 30 minutes before the work finish line in your calendar, and you've identified 1 to 3 goal-directed actions and scheduled them into your calendar for tomorrow. The second phase of the Power Down ritual is to schedule your day. This should only take a few minutes, but it's a key part of setting up your day for flow. You may have heard the parable of the rocks, the pebbles, and the sand. To fill an empty glass jar, you have to put the big rocks in first, then the pebbles, then the sand. Otherwise, the rocks ain't going to fit. If you fill the jar with sand, you won't be able to get the big rocks in no matter what you do. This is a lesson about task sequencing. If you make time for the most important things first, you'll get them all done and still have time for other things that aren't as important. But if you don't do things in this order, you won't be able to get the bigger things in at all. That's how we want to think about scheduling our day. Our goal-directed actions are our big rocks. So let's schedule these first. Now, here are the steps. Firstly, block off time for your most important goal-directed action. This is your top priority and should be done when you're most alert and focused no matter what. Next, schedule your 1 to 2 other goal-directed actions if you have them, being as specific as possible. Instead of work on sales emails, rewrite the first 3 emails in the sales sequence and put that on your calendar. Estimate how long each action will take. Be realistic, but don't pad the time. The goal is to create a sense of challenge to trigger flow. Commit to completing these actions no matter what. Treat them as non-negotiable. Everything else is secondary. Next, what are your other non-negotiables? This should include your recurring work start line, work finish line, power down ritual and any other essential commitments, appointments, family time, etc. Block these out next. Now, look at the rest of your day. Fill in the remaining time with any meetings, appointments, or routine tasks that need to be done. And be realistic about how long things will take. Leave some buffer time for unexpected tasks or breaks. And finally, review your schedule. Does it align with your goals and priorities? Make any necessary adjustments. And remember, your goal-directed actions are the big rocks. They go in first. Everything else is the sand that fills the gaps. By front-loading your day with your most important work and scheduling everything else around it, you're setting yourself up for maximum productivity and progress. When you wake up tomorrow, you'll know exactly when to work and what to work on. That's the power of separating planning from doing. All right, so as part of your power down ritual, you've identified your 1 to 3 goal-directed actions and you've scheduled your day. The third phase of the power down ritual is critical for flow, and that is to set clear goals for each goal-directed action. Clear goals are a quintessential flow trigger. Unlike bigger goals, like those you set on a daily or weekly level or beyond, a clear goal is an action to take, like kicking a soccer ball into the net, not an outcome to attain, like winning a soccer match. Now, the challenge people have with clear goals is that they tend to not make them clear enough. The key to having clear goals actually unlock flow is to set wildly specific, incredibly clear goals per task. That way the brain doesn't have to expend resources in wondering how, why, or what to do in order to be able to enter a task in the first place, which is a big driver of procrastination. This doesn't need to take long. You can write these clear goals within 60 seconds, and you can write them on a notepad or in your notes app, somewhere that you throw them away afterwards. You don't have to store them or anything like that. So here's exactly what to do. Go to the calendar event for your first goal-directed action tomorrow, and bear in mind that there might be only one goal-directed action, but never more than 3. In the event description, break that action down into the 3 to 5 super specific clear goals, writing in the clear goals within the notes section of the calendar event, even if the task will only take an hour. These clear goals act as targets for your attention that might otherwise roam unproductively. This way you get a steady drip of dopamine, and these should be concrete baby steps you need to take. For example, if the task is creating a client presentation, the micro goals might be to write the intro slide, to add data from past client results, to design graphics using brand colors. Next, you want to list those clear goals as bullet points right in the calendar event. Be as detailed as possible, like you're leaving step-by-step instructions for yourself. The whole process should take a minute tops. But those 60 seconds of breaking your goal-directed actions down into clear, actionable steps will save you a ton of energy, time, and mental turmoil when you sit down to actually execute the work tomorrow. No more staring at a blank screen, wondering where to begin. Now go ahead, pause the video, and do this now for tomorrow. Next, repeat this process for your other goal-directed actions. Open up each calendar event, jot down the micro clear goals as bullet points. I know this might seem overly detailed at first, but that's actually the point. When your goals are this specific and laid out in concrete terms, your mind doesn't have to diverge wondering what to do next. You can jump right in and make progress immediately. This is a key component of calendar surrender. It's how you get into flow faster and stay there longer. And when you map out your goal-directed actions with these wildly clear, minuscule clear goals within the task and take the first step to the first step, you can dive right into work the next day and get into flow. You can react to what's already there instead of deciding. Think of it like having a personal trainer in the gym. All you need to do is lift the weights. They move you to each machine, load up the weights so that all you have to do is push. Compare this to wandering around the gym, trying to configure different machines, wondering how many sets you should do with each thing, how much weight you should add, whether you should do biceps or legs, or whether you did too much of each one. Clear goals are what can help you turn goal-directed actions into something similar. The last part of this process is to actually take the first step to the first step. Here's how. Look at the first clear goal you wrote down for your first goal-directed action tomorrow. Identify the very first tiny action you need to take to get started on that clear goal. Continuing the presentation example, if your first clear goal is write the intro slide, the first step to the first step would be opening PowerPoint, naming the file and saving it in the right folder and having it up on your computer. Now actually take that first tiny action right now. Don't put it off till tomorrow. Open the program, create the file, name it, save it, whatever it is. It should only take a few seconds. And I know it might be tempting to skip this part and just dive in tomorrow, but trust me, taking these few seconds in your power down ritual at the end of every day to get the ball rolling will make the world of difference for smooth entry into the task and access to flow. When you sit down to work tomorrow, you won't have to overcome that initial inertia of starting. The hardest part will already be done. Plus, by taking that first tiny action, you're priming your brain to tackle the rest of the task. And you're giving your default mode network, your upgraded rumination, something to incubate on before the work starts. So when it's time to get to work, your mind will be ready to hit the ground running and get into flow faster. Okay, so let's recap where we are in setting up your power down ritual. By now you should have scheduled your daily power down ritual in your calendar 30 minutes before your work finish line, identified your 1 to 3 goal-directed actions for the following day and added them to your calendar, scheduled any other tasks, events, or meetings in the day, remembering that the goal-directed actions are the big rocks and they need to become first in the sequence, broken down each goal-directed action into 3 to 5 specific micro clear goals, writing the calendar event description. And remember, these aren't to-dos, these are clear goals within the goal-directed action, which is the big action you're going to take, all contained within your calendar. You can blissfully discard your to-do list from here on out as well. Anytime you have a to-do, put it on your calendar, a day or 2 days or 3 days out, whenever you think you can most likely do it. And put all to-dos on there with a time estimate of how long it's going to take so you don't have to keep a to-do list anymore. And if you keep dragging those actions out into further weeks, try and scrap them entirely or actually execute them and get them done fully. So at this point, you've taken the first tiny step for each goal-directed action, like creating and naming the file you'll need, and you've set the stage for an incredibly high-flow day tomorrow. Your goal-directed actions are locked and loaded, and you've primed your brain to tackle them efficiently. The last pieces of the puzzle are clearing the decks of any lingering tasks or loose ends and tracking your flow habits. I know this seems like a lot. It's going to become automatic and not feel too heavy as you begin to execute it, even though it takes a little bit to onboard. But the next phase of this power down ritual is to clear the cognitive load. This is where you'll tie up all loose ends for the day so you can relax into the evening with zero cognitive load. That is, the number of items you hold in working memory. Lowering cognitive load is a key mechanism for triggering flow state. Think of every open loop as a fish hook tugging at you and your time, energy, and attention. It helps to snip all those lines. The solution is to identify open loops, externalize them by writing them down, and identify the required action to move them toward closure, including scheduling that action into your calendar. Doing this at the end of each workday makes you aware of the root causes of open loops so you can eliminate them. Maybe you're constantly open looping about a certain team member or a financial problem or a health issue. This process prevents the compounding of open loops. Next, clear all key messages within any of your inboxes. I know this can feel overwhelming. You don't have to clear all messages, just all key messages in order to minimize cognitive load. This does not mean get to inbox zero. That's unnecessary. In fact, all throughout this training, you'll be developing the ability to tolerate the messes that will come as you focus on the essential at the cost of the trivial. And as part of your power down ritual, you just need to respond to what needs responding to and schedule whatever you need to schedule based on the demands within your inbox. Here's how to do it. Open your personal knowledge management app like Evernote or Notion, or grab a piece of paper and pen. Do a brain dump of all the tasks, large and small, that are on your mind. Get everything out of your head and onto the page. And for each task, decide whether it's urgent and important. If it is, and it will take less than 2 minutes to do it now. If it's urgent and important but will take longer, schedule a specific time to do it tomorrow. For non-urgent tasks, add them to your calendar or a later list to review during your next power down ritual. And for any tasks that have been hanging around your list for a long time without getting done, consider whether they're truly necessary. If not, delete them. If they are, break them down into smaller steps and schedule the first one. Look at your calendar for tomorrow. Are there any meetings or appointments that need preparing for? If so, jot down what you need to do and either do it now, if it's quick, or schedule time for it tomorrow and plug the details into the calendar event itself. Clear all key messages from your inboxes, open up your inbox and start with what looks like the most important message. Is it a question you can answer in under 2 minutes? If so, go ahead and reply and then archive it. If not, if you need more time to put a thoughtful response together, then schedule 5 to 15 minutes to respond to it later, today or tomorrow, and then move on to the next message. Once you've gone through your primary inbox, move on to any other inboxes you use regularly, like Slack, Teams, or your phone's messaging app. Apply the same process. Identify what needs a response or action, reply quickly to anything that takes less than 2 minutes, and then schedule the rest as needed. Finally, tidy up your physical and digital workspaces. Close unnecessary tabs and get your desk ready for a fresh start tomorrow. The goal here is to end the day with a clear mind and a clean slate. By getting all those nagging tasks and loose ends out of your head, you're reducing cognitive load and freeing up mental space for deep, focused work on your goal-directed action. Plus, you're setting yourself up for a smooth, stress-free start to the next day. No more scrambling in the morning to figure out what needs to be done or putting out fires from yesterday's unfinished business. You can dive right into your goal-directed actions and make serious progress before most people even have their workday begun. So far, in setting up your power down ritual, you've scheduled your power down ritual for 30 minutes before your work finish line. You've identified 1 to 3 goal-directed actions for the next day. You've scheduled your day. You've written down clear goals for each goal-directed action directly into your calendar, and you've tied up any loose ends to reduce cognitive load. This brings us to the final phase of your power down ritual. Almost there. Power down ritual phase 5, which is tracking your flow habits. Now, remember earlier when I mentioned that you'd be using your calendar to track your flow habits? Well, this is the time for you to do it. At the end of your power down ritual, you'll quickly look back on your day and determine whether you completed the flow habits that you've learned and are training so far. At this point, the 3 flow habits that we're training are calendar surrender, work compression, and the power down ritual. That's all you are actually going to have to do on a recurring basis. Yes, there's some upfront work building out all this stuff, which is what we're doing right here in this module. But over time, you just got to hit those 3. That's it from today. Now, calendar surrender is meticulously scheduling every aspect of your day in advance, like we've talked about, tasks, schedule, habits, and adhering to it so that it's your mission control panel for peak performance, eliminating in-the-moment deliberation to free your mind for focused execution. Work compression is reducing work hours by 25% or more into a fixed container with clear start and finish lines, and then actually finishing work at the finish line to force a recalibration of resources and inputs, prioritization, focus, and leverage to achieve the same output in less time. And then the power down rituals we just went through. A daily non-negotiable 30-minute meeting with yourself right before your work finish line to separate planning from doing, set up tomorrow's goal-directed actions, and clear cognitive load for optimal recovery and flow the following day. Now, here's how to add this habit tracking functionality to your calendar, your mission control panel for peak performance, and schedule these flow habits into your calendar to make sure you do them every day. Note that some features and terminology may vary slightly depending on the specific calendar interface you're using, but don't worry too much about this. This is how to set it up in Google Calendar, and you can do the equivalent, which will be in the resources for any other app you have. Step 1 is to access Google Calendar tasks. We're going to do this by opening Google Calendar, making sure we're logged in with the right Google account, then enabling tasks. On the desktop, we want to click the tasks icon on the top right side of our screen to open the task sidebar. On the mobile app, tap the 3 horizontal lines in the top left corner, then select tasks. Then step 2 is to create a dedicated flow habits list. In the task sidebar on the left, click create new list or the plus symbol, then name the list flow habits. Then click done to save. Then step 3 is to add your daily habits as tasks. Select the flow habits list, ensure your flow habits list is selected within the task sidebar, and then add a task, and then type in the name of your first habit. We're setting up the following habits: calendar surrender, work compression, the power down ritual, and then press enter to save and repeat, and add all the flow habits as individual tasks. Step 4 is to schedule the tasks as recurring. Click on the habit task to open its details, click the add date time icon, and you can set the time for the same time as your power down ritual. Look for an icon that typically resembles a recycling symbol and click or tap it. Set recurrence, a pop-up will appear with options to customize the recurrence. And the frequency is to choose how often the task repeats, which in this case is daily. And then you want to select each of your work days for the days of the week. And the end date, since this is an ongoing habit, set this to never. And then save changes, click save or done to confirm your recurring settings. Each of your daily flow habits should now appear on your calendar with the recurring schedule you set. All right, now with your flow habits tasks calendar set up, here's exactly what you'll do at the end of your daily power down ritual. You're going to open your calendar, navigate to the task section. You should see your flow habits list with the flow habits you've been working on. For each flow habit, just ask yourself, did I do it or not today? If you did, great, check it. If not, that's okay, but leave it unchecked so you can see over time how consistent you are with your flow habits. The goal is awareness, not perfection. If you didn't complete a habit, simply leave the circle blank. Don't delete the task. Remember, these are recurring daily habits. Take a moment to reflect on your progress. If you checked off all of your habits, give yourself a mental pat on the back. You're building powerful flow habits that will transform how you work. Over time, as you check off those boxes day after day, these practices will become second nature. You'll be dropping into flow effortlessly and regularly. So don't stress if you miss a day here or there. Just keep showing up. Progress beats perfection. The flow habits are the foundational path to peak performance. And by tracking these daily, you'll ensure you're staying on that path one step at a time. Now, as of today, start using your mission control panel for peak performance and running the power down ritual every single day. Power down ritual is like a Formula One pit stop. During a race, the driver can't simultaneously drive at top speed and strategize about the next leg of the race. Instead, they pull into the pit stop where a team of specialists quickly refuel the car, change the tires, and make strategic adjustments. This pit stop is essential for winning the race, even though the car isn't moving during it. Similarly, your power down ritual is a strategic pit stop where you refuel, having a hard stop for recovery. Plan your next move, your goal-directed actions, and then change your tires, clearing cognitive load. This ritual is essential for winning your race, sprinting toward your work finish line, even though you're not actively working during it. Now, the average professional rarely does anything close to this power down ritual. At best, they'll make a somewhat arbitrary bulleted list on a Monday, often determined by a superior or whatever mood they happen to be in that moment. It's not at all anchored to their long-term vision, and it's not scheduled into the calendar so that it actually gets done. On the other hand, the most elite performers on earth are the most goal-directed. There's a conscientiousness about how each moment is being spent and the degree to which it actually has been thought out as to whether it will move them maximally forward or not, and a level of almost violent attack on those goal-directed actions that leads to extreme accomplishment. The degree to which you are effective at identifying goal-directed actions is the degree to which you will minimize wasted effort and maximize goal attainment with minimal sacrifice. It's how you can succeed wildly in your professional life without robbing anything from your personal life. In fact, you'll enhance both. Now, here's the key to remember. The cornerstone of your productivity is doing goal-directed actions while in flow. Work on the best possible thing in the most effective state of consciousness possible. If the only thing you do is identify and execute 1 to 3 goal-directed actions per day with religious consistency, you will dramatically boost performance and productivity. By taking just 30 minutes at the end of each workday to plan your goal-directed actions, break them down into clear steps, and tie up loose ends, you're setting yourself up for more flow. You're ensuring that every day you're making meaningful progress on what matters most. I know it can be tempting to skip the power down ritual when you're busy or tired, but trust me, this is the most important 30 minutes of your day. It's the time when you take control of your trajectory and make sure you're always moving in the right direction. At this point, building your mission control panel is complete. You've engineered your days to remove obstacles, boost flow triggers, respect the flow cycle, and guide you directly toward your biggest goals. Let's recap your progress so far in this module, which has been monumental and foundational for everything that you're going to achieve within this experience. So let's do a quick recap on setting up your mission control panel for peak performance to make sure you've got it all. So you've created 7 color-coded calendars for the key categories of goal-directed actions, high-leverage actions, other work, active recovery, sleep, social, and time evaporation. You've scheduled all your recurring events, ensuring you're making space for the routines and practices that increase your flow proneness. You've upgraded your rumination by putting your routines on decision autopilot. You've established hard start and finish lines for your workday so that you recalibrate inputs from hours worked to non-time-based things like better judgment, decision-making, working faster, and more intelligently. You've set up your daily power down ritual 30 minutes before your finish line, and during this time, you're identifying your goal-directed actions, breaking them down into micro clear goals, scheduling the rest of the day, tying up loose ends to reduce cognitive load, and tracking your flow habits using the tasks feature in your calendar. Now, putting all of this together, picture this. You wake up in the morning and you open your mission control panel for peak performance. The first event of the day is your morning routine with every micro decision laid out. No need to wonder what's next. It's all right there. By automating these minute details, you've upgraded your rumination, which makes your idle time and default mode network maximally creative. You review your 1 to 3 goal-directed actions for the day already scheduled in your calendar. The micro steps are broken down and the first tiny action is done from the night before. You know exactly what to do and how to start. Wildly specific, clear goals within your calendar are a potent flow trigger, allowing you to react rather than to decide. You dive into focused work, plunging into flow for hours on end. As your predetermined work finish line looms, an alarm reminds you of your power down ritual. You spend 30 minutes planning tomorrow's goal-directed actions, strategizing, scheduling them, and even taking the first step to the first step. You scan for any open loops, jotting down next actions and adding them to your schedule. Worry cleared, cognitive load lightened, and the burden to produce and engage in work lifted. You're able to relax deeply and recover fully. Finally, you review your flow habits in the calendar's task list, checking off the core behaviors you're wiring in. With each check mark, a little dopamine hit reinforces your commitment to flow, peak performance, and self-actualization. As the day winds down, you feel a lightness and control that used to seem out of reach. You feel purposeful and goal-directed. Your calendars become your mission control panel for peak performance, guiding you directly to your North Star. With this level of clarity, focus, and flow, you know anything is possible. This is the reality that awaits you when you install your mission control panel for peak performance, which you're doing right now. By strategically structuring your days, weeks, and months around the 4 pillars of flow, you create the conditions for consistent world-class performance. Now that you've built it, start using your mission control panel to guide your days starting now. You'll be using the mission control panel of your calendar every day throughout this training, and we'll continue to optimize it along the way. Don't get overwhelmed by trying to implement everything at once. For now, all you need to focus on is setting up your calendar and work container and establishing your power down ritual, the key things that we went through. These foundational steps will set the stage for the rest of the flow habits we'll continue to develop. Surrender to your calendar and watch as your productivity, creativity, and overall performance soars to new heights. And I'll see you next week as we continue to master the skill of accessing flow on demand. We'll be tackling one of the biggest flow blockers that plagues modern professionals: distraction. Well done on today. Epic, heroic work. And until next week, all the best.